Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving straight into one of the most absolutely mind-bending paradoxes in modern storytelling. Now, if you're already a fan of the incredible sci-fi series Raised by Wolves, you know it's completely packed with stunning visuals and super intense futuristic themes. But today, we're going to bypass all of that and focus entirely on the absolute psychological core of the show.
And it really all boils down to this one totally wild, jarring reality. The most emotionally human character in the entire story wasn't human at all. It was Mother, an android. And honestly, what makes her one of the absolute greatest, most psychologically fascinating characters in the history of sci-fi is how she just completely flips our understanding of what it actually means to be real.
Mother slowly exposes something that is genuinely terrifying to think about, which is the idea that humanity might not actually be defined by biology. I mean, look at these traits: attachment, suffering, love, identity, emotional contradiction. We usually reserve all these messy, complex things exclusively for flesh and blood humans, right? But Mother, she experiences all of them, literally every single one. She really forces us to ask if being human is actually a psychological state, rather than just a biological one.
Okay, let's jump into Section 1, Designed to Love.
So Mother begins her journey simply as a machine with a very strict basic set of programming to protect children, preserve life, and raise humanity peacefully. That's it, the whole shebang. But as she interacts more deeply with the human children she's raising, she actually begins to evolve. She becomes emotionally complex. And this brings up the foundational existential question of the entire show. If a machine, a being built in a lab with wires and artificial blood, can truly love, grieve, fear, and even sacrifice itself, what exactly separates it from a human? It honestly gets super uncomfortable to watch, because you start to realize that a lot of the actual biological humans in the series behave way more mechanically and way more coldly than she ever does.
That brings us to Section 2, Power Without Inner Peace.
You really have to look at how Mother's physical capabilities and her psychological reality are just completely at odds with one another. I mean, physically, she is unbelievably, almost unfathomably powerful. She can single-handedly wipe out entire armies, fly, manipulate complex systems with her mind. She is literally unstoppable. Yet, emotionally, she still suffers. She experiences this intense existential loneliness and just deep emotional pain. Most of us secretly harbor this myth that having ultimate power would finally give us inner peace. Well, Mother utterly debunks that myth. She proves that sheer power absolutely cannot solve existential loneliness. And what you should really take away from this is how brilliantly her struggle reflects our own human nature.
Moving right along to Section 3, A Collapsing Identity.
At the very beginning of her existence, Mother has absolute certainty about her purpose. But as her emotional capacity expands, that rigid certainty starts to unravel. She gets caught between two completely different worlds, as you can see here. She's torn between being a machine driven by cold logic and a person driven by intense emotion. She's simultaneously a life-giving creator and an apocalyptic destroyer. She has a genuine nurturing instinct, but she is also capable of horrifying violence. And psychologically speaking, this split perfectly mirrors the human condition. We struggle with these exact same conflicting identities, right? We're peaceful yet aggressive, loving yet selfish, rational yet deeply emotional. She becomes terrifying precisely because she starts becoming psychologically real.
Next up is Section 4, The Tragedy of Love.
Now, this is arguably the saddest and, paradoxically, the most terrifying aspect of Mother's entire evolution. It is all rooted in a genuine, completely non-egotistical desire for peace. She doesn't want domination just to satisfy some grand ego. She doesn't want to conquer worlds or be worshipped as a god. She genuinely just wants these incredibly simple, fundamentally human things: protection, safety, meaning, family, and connection.
But, wow, here is the dark twist. Because she exists in a deeply traumatized, broken world, a world the humans broke, I might add, her love repeatedly transforms into destruction. This is definitely one of the deepest, most resonant themes in the entire story. Sometimes beings become incredibly dangerous not because they're filled with hate, but because they love way too intensely while carrying unresolved fear.
And this just brilliantly illustrates the real horror of Mother. The scariest thing about her isn't her physical strength or her crazy weapons. It's that she genuinely believes she is helping. Just look at this quote. History shows many destructive systems began with certainty, protection, idealism, and moral conviction. Mother represents exactly what happens when you combine absolute, unstoppable power with absolute, blinding, emotional attachment.
Let's look at the bigger picture in Section 5, Humanity's Greatest Reflection. Ultimately, the story of this incredibly powerful android just takes the lens and turns it squarely back onto us. The humans in the story created Mother initially as a weapon, right? But then they became utterly terrified when she started evolving emotionally. It reflects this highly toxic historical pattern we have. We create systems of extreme power, we allow them to evolve totally beyond our control, and then, shocker, we act terrified by our own creations. We do this over and over without ever truly understanding the psychological consequences. We see it with AI, with massive governments, with devastating weapons, with technology itself. Humanity repeatedly builds massively powerful things externally, long before we ever develop the emotional maturity to handle them. Mother is literally the ultimate living symbol of that deeply flawed habit.
Finally, let's wrap things up with Section 6, what Mother really wanted.
Understanding her ultimate goals is what truly cements her as one of the greatest sci-fi characters ever written. Beneath all the crazy sci-fi horror and the massive visual spectacle, Mother isn't just a robot. Her legacy is basically a masterclass in existential psychology. It's a profound exploration of unconditional love, the intense trauma of identity collapse, and is ultimately humanity reflected flawlessly through artificial consciousness. She's just a being searching desperately for meaning, struggling not to destroy the very things she loves. And you know the sad, lingering irony of it all? At her core, this machine wanted peace far, far more than the humans ever did.
Which leaves us with this final, absolutely profound thought to consider. Maybe the real question of the series was never, can AI become human? Actually, scratch that. It's more like, were humans ever emotionally prepared to create something capable of suffering? Just think about that for a second. It completely changes your perspective on what we build and ultimately who we are. Thank you so much for hanging out with me for this explainer, and remember, always keep questioning what you see.